March 18, 2011.
Good evening, I'm Terry Moran, and American blood and treasure is on the line anew tonight as President Obama prepares to take military action against Libya with UN backing and in cooperation with France, Britain, and others. Despite this pressure, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi today continued his bloody assault on the opposition, using tanks and heavy artillery to bombard the town of Misrata. That's an opposition base. So, what price is the U.S. prepared to pay in Libya? Once again, after a decade of war, a president is sending American troops into harm's way.
That there is no decision I face as your commander-in-chief that I consider as carefully as the decision to ask our men and women to use military force.
But Barack Obama has now opened another front in America's wars, Libya.
Ceasefire must be implemented immediately. That means all attacks against civilians must stop.
For nearly a month now, ordinary Libyans have risen up to rid their land of the 42-year dictatorship of Gaddafi. And after some initial soaring successes, Gaddafi's better-equipped professional forces have slowly strangled the rebellion, using air power especially to rain terror down on his own people. So the UN acted.
The resolution is adopted,
imposing a no-fly zone, and President Obama committed the United States to the fight.
Let me be clear. These terms are not negotiable. These terms are not subject to negotiation.
But the president's bold declaration today raises more questions than it answers. Like, what is the goal here? The UN Security Council resolution authorizing the no-fly zone over Libya is clear. This is a humanitarian intervention aimed at stopping Gaddafi from killing civilians. And that's what President Obama said today.
Now, here's why this matters to us. Left unchecked, we have every reason to believe that Gaddafi would commit atrocities against his people. Many thousands could die.
But there's another goal the president has announced previously: regime change, getting rid of Gaddafi.
Colonel Gaddafi needs to step down from power and leave.
What's the goal of this operation? Is it regime change, get rid of Gaddafi, or is it humanitarian, protect those rebels?
The answer is both. There's a humanitarian goal, but from the outset of this crisis, the administration has escalated its rhetoric, and it has said Gaddafi has to go.
Richard Haas is a veteran American diplomat, a guy who's been in the room when these kinds of decisions are made, and he's now the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's skeptical of this policy.
If we're telling him, at the end of the day, we're not going to live with you, why should he show restraint? We have raised the stakes, yet our means are still limited. I do not understand the connection between our rhetoric and what our policy is.
Another question: what happens next? No-fly zones sound simple, but in reality, they're big, complicated, expensive, and risky endeavors. That means a huge effort.
The front line will be the fighters that would take care of any Libyan aircraft that would be out there. To keep those fighters in the air, you need aerial refueling tankers, provide gas so they can stay airborne longer. Behind them, you need things like jammers that will jam the surface-to-air missile sites, that would jam Libyan communications.
And war is always and everywhere unpredictable. Retired General Wesley Clark commanded NATO during the wars in the Balkans in the 1990s.
The UN Security Council resolution says no occupation by foreign military troops, but that doesn't mean you couldn't put, let's say, air and naval gunfire liaison coordinating teams on the ground and use those folks to support the rebels if it comes to fighting or taking out Gaddafi's forces.
The United States essentially lit a fuse that's easier to light than it is to extinguish, because the limited steps that we are doing are unlikely to be the end of it. If they fail, the United States and the world are going to be on the hook to do a lot more.
And finally, what is the end game? It might be clear who we're fighting against. Muammar Gaddafi, a longtime weirdo and thug in the region, a boogeyman of the Middle East for decades. But who are we fighting for?
One of the lessons of the last few years of Iraq and Afghanistan ought to be that we've got to be doubly careful about getting involved in these military situations when we are not fully knowledgeable about the situation. Sure, we know we don't like Muammar Gaddafi. On the other hand, are we so sure we like the alternative? Are we really sure that we want to help bring about a Libya that may not be in control of all of its territory, so groups like Al-Qaeda can put down roots? Are we really sure we want to get involved in a military intervention that we quite honestly don't know what happens next?
But President Obama and the UN have made a calculation. Better the devil we don't know than the one we do know.
Somewhere a week or two ago, the tipping point was passed, and it was clear that Gaddafi wouldn't listen to reason, that this wasn't going to end peacefully, and there wasn't any way that in the aftermath that anyone in the world could feel safe and comfortable dealing with the Gaddafi regime.
Tonight in New York, some news. White House counterterrorism advisor John Brennan told reporters that the U.S. is preparing for a possible Gaddafi-directed terrorist attack. Quote, Gaddafi has the penchant to do things of a very concerning nature, Brennan said. We have to anticipate and be prepared. Up next.